Hey there, hat lovers. Welcome to the VGC with Hats YouTube channel. And today we've got a very special set for you. We've got Max Douglas, aka starmetroid, versus Kelvin Koon, aka lyingliepard. And these two are authors for the VGC with Hats website. They also recently made it to the finals of the Vancouver Midseason Showdown using very similar teams. And so we're going to check out that set today with some commentary. And let's just dive right in. And so we see that on the top, Max has this team of uh, Groudon, Kyogre, Salamence, Kangaskhan, Thundurus, and Bronzong, whereas Kelvin has a Mawile instead of the Kangaskhan, but otherwise the same team. There are some other interesting differences between how these players built these teams, not just which alternate Mega they used, but also the moveset of Thundurus. I am very certain Max knew this at the time, but Kelvin was using a Hidden Power Water Thundurus, and Max's Thundurus instead had Protect. So those are very big differences between the two. Mawile versus Kangaskhan is a very big difference, and we're going to see how that plays into this mirror match, because Mawile versus Kangaskhan is largely something for facing opposing Eviltal teams, and to some extent I think it's a bit of a dual primals counter as well. Mawile not as good against opposing Big Six teams like Groudon, Xerneas, Kangaskhan, Salamence, Talonflame, Smeargle, but at the same time, it can deal very well with opposing Kangaskhan. It's a better Pokemon to use against Rayquaza, against Eviltal, and Kangaskhan's faster than Kyogre, so that's another thing in Kangaskhan's favor. But you actually have to use a fast Kangaskhan to be sure of that, and that's not something that everyone is absolutely going to be using. So we're about to dive right in here, and we'll see what these two players chose. One thing about this matchup, I don't think we're going to be seeing a Trick Room strategy out of either of these players, and that's because Bronzong is absolutely abysmal in the mirror match. Think about it. You're facing an opposing Groudon, Kyogre, possibly a Mawile or a Kangaskhan, maybe a Thundurus or a Salamence that's going to intimidate you. Mawile is going to intimidate you. Bronzong really doesn't put on any pressure. And so we didn't see Bronzong come out from either of these players. Max choosing to lead Thundurus Groudon to Kelvin's Mawile Thundurus. So this is interesting. I like this lead from Kelvin. I think that Mawile is a Pokemon that gives Kelvin a big advantage against Max because of that Intimidate, and because it's a really good lead against a potential Kangaskhan. And so we didn't see a Kangaskhan on Max's side, but right now Kelvin has the ability to switch Mawile out and use that Hidden Power Water Thundurus to just one-shot Groudon immediately. And even without Thundurus, if he switches Mawile out and brings in something like Kyogre, Groudon got intimidated. That wouldn't be a safe play because Max has an opposing Thundurus, but it gave him a lot of options right off the bat. And we don't see Kelvin switch out, actually. He stays in and takes a Thunderbolt from Max's Thundurus, launching a Thunderbolt of his own into the opposing Thundurus. Sorry, that was Kelvin launching a Thundurus into Max's Thundurus, and Groudon using a Rock Tomb on Thundurus. Now that's interesting, so... and Mawile one-shotting with a Play Rough, got a critical hit. I don't know how much that mattered. Depending on whether Max's Thundurus is physically or especially bulky, I'm pretty sure it's going to survive a Play Rough either way, unless it's really, really frail. But it's interesting that Max went for the Rock Tomb there. And the reason I say that is because it shows somewhat that Kelvin is very comfortable with this archetype. You know, he recognizes that in this mirror match, Max has to see that switch-in play coming that I was talking about earlier. Maybe I would have... that exact reasoning that I just outlined right at the beginning of that turn, that's what Max was preparing for. And so he didn't want to use something like Fire Punch to deal with Mawile. He also didn't want to Precipice Blades in case there's some sort of... he's got an Intimidated Groudon. Precipice Blades is spread damage, and it's not going to hit the Thundurus. Max recognizes that the Thundurus is a big problem for his team, and so he goes for a Rock Tomb on the opposing Thundurus, but he also fails to really capitalize on maybe even knocking out Mawile there. That turn could have gone very differently had Max just gone for a Fire Punch on the Mawile slot. So Kelvin recognized this. The reason I say I like that play from Kelvin is because Kelvin recognized that that was not a likely play Max was going to make. And so we saw Max bringing Kyogre there, and Kelvin now retreats Mawile, bringing in his own Kyogre. And so we don't have to worry about a Fire Punch from Groudon, but we do have to worry about a Precipice Blades. And Groudon is intimidated, so it's not going to be doing huge damage, but this switch is a defensive switch in that it really lets Kelvin take less damage this turn from the opposing Kyogre. And that's big. And you can see that he used that turn to launch a Thunder Wave into the Max's Kyogre, and Kyogre took out the Thundurus with an Ice Beam. So Max could have Water Spouted there. He could have Scalded, presumably. That's the moveset that they're running. Some other Kyogres might run Origin Pulse. Either way, Water Spout or Ice Beam, he was fine. Kelvin was fine with that. He just wanted to make that Kyogre slower than Mawile, and now Kelvin gets to face an intimidated Groudon and a paralyzed Kyogre with his own Kyogre and a Mawile. That's fantastic. So Groudon's not going to be able to KO either of these Pokemon right now. Maybe Mawile with Precipice Blades. I'm not so sure on that calc. When there's an intimidated Groudon, spread damage. Mawile's at 92 HP. That seems like it should KO. I am not 100% certain of that. It depends on how bulky the Mawile is. But even if he does go for that, that leaves him wide open for a Water Spout from Kelvin's Kyogre, which I think Kelvin's okay with. So if I were Kelvin, I'd play rough into the Kyogre and I'd Water Spout. And we see that play coming out. So big damage coming, 60-ish%, and a rough paralysis on Max's Kyogre. So, that's Max hasn't gotten very lucky off the bat. He got critical hitted on the first turn, losing his Thundurus. I don't know how much that mattered. I think it needed the critical hit, so he lost Thundurus very early. He gets fully paralyzed right off the bat and fails to take advantage of anything there. I mean, if he had knocked out Mawile there, he would have 3 Pokemon left in back to Kelvin's 2. Might have been able to pull something back, but now he just has to kind of worm his way around things again. And we see him retreat Groudon back to try and get control of that weather and bring in Salamence to launch both an Intimidate into the Mawile slot and and this is an interesting turn for Max, actually. He opts to protect his Kyogre and switch in Salamence, which I think is a missed opportunity. You're down this far in the game. I think that if you are going to pull those defensive switches where you're trying to reestablish weather control, I think you need to take advantage of that turn and try and do something. If he had Scalded Kelvin's Kyogre, I don't know if that really changes the flow of the match. Maybe he gets a burn. It's not huge damage. If he Scalds into the Mawile slot, Mawile protected, and that means that the turn would have turned out exactly the same, barring the fact that Kyogre would be able to protect. Now, because he protected this turn, he can't really launch much of an assault. I don't think Mawile would have a 100% chance of KOing Kyogre with a play rough there, but at this point, it's really just about how far behind he is in the matchup. So now we see Kelvin bring back Kyogre in for his own Groudon, and I really like this play, and it tells me that Kelvin's played this team a lot, and he's played this matchup a lot, because what he's doing is he's making sure that Max, who made a switch to try and reestablish weather control, Max made that switch. Kelvin is now making sure that Kyogre can come back in at some point in the game and reestablish the rain. And so Kelvin's not going to let Max have full control of the weather right up till the end of the day. We see another paralysis on Max's Kyogre, and I missed what Mawile did there. I'm guessing it play roughed into the Salamence slot because Salamence protected. So Max is not in a good position. Kelvin has his Kyogre in the back. He's got a fresh Groudon out right now, and he's got a damaged, paralyzed Kyogre who is about to get knocked out by a Precipice Blades. And yes, Kyogre goes down to the Precipice Blades. Mawile not going to get knocked out by a VGC 2016 Salamence. Maybe if it was running something crazy like Flamethrower or Fire Blast, but I don't think that you see that on these teams. A lot of the time these teams use something like Tailwind. Very rarely maybe you make the choice to use Draco Meteor, but I think Tailwind is the stronger play when you don't need to deal with opposing Rayquaza using your Salamence. It's not really the important Pokemon for dealing with Rayquaza on this team, because this team has Kyogre, it's got Mawile, if you're Kelvin. So maybe Max does because he doesn't have Mawile. Maybe that's a choice he makes, but I think that Tailwind's maybe a bit stronger, just so you have the speed control option. But at this point, the game's already over. Max just, going to try and critical hit Precipice Blades to try and take this game. He does knock out the Mawile there. That's important. Mawile getting a bit of Sucker Punch damage in before it goes down. Now we're going to see Kyogre come back in for Kelvin, and I remember Kyogre had 128 HP. A spread Precipice Blades I don't think is going to knock out this Kyogre. Max really needs a critical hit here, and he needs to hit both targets, and I am not 100% sure that he'll even KO the opposing Groudon either. And actually we see Groudon avoid that attack, and that's going to be the end of it for Max. This is Kelvin's game. Kyogre gets the Scald off, and that'll finish off Groudon, and so game 1 goes to Kelvin. Whew. You needed a double critical hit through the 85% accuracy. How does Max adapt for game 2? We'll have to see.